The other day, I got a really good question about whether client perspectives in the evidence-based practice triangle and client testimonials are the same thing. And so I wanted to elaborate a little bit on that because I think that was a really good question. So first of all, my name is Dudek-Brannan, and I help clinicians and educators be better leaders so they can make a bigger impact with their services. And so that's why things like evidence-based practice are obviously really important to talk about. So the other day I made a video saying that client testimonials are not part of evidence-based practice. And somebody brought up a really good point that I wanted to clarify because I think this does get really confusing. And the question was, well, if we are considering the three aspects of the evidence-based practice triangle, which include things like peer-reviewed evidence, so actual evidence from research, things like clinical experience, and then finally client perspectives. If we're considering those three pieces, couldn't testimonials fit under client perspectives? And I see those as two different things. And I wanted to clarify those nuances and how I interpret what that evidence-based practice triangle actually means when it comes to using client perspectives and how this is different from client testimonials. So first of all, I wanted to start by talking about testimonials and just say that while they are different from things like clinical case studies that typically are considered to be something that could potentially be published and used as evidence, testimonials are a little bit different. Clinical case studies are usually more of a before and after, and it's more rigorous as far as collecting data and things like that. Whereas a client testimonial is just like you were seeing a client, a student, a patient. Obviously, the word that you use depends on the setting that you're in, but somebody that is working with you just says something nice about an experience they had working with you. This could be that they say that you're an amazing therapist, or this could be that they said that they got amazing service while they were working with your staff, that they just had a great experience working with you. And again, they're singing your praises. So obviously a testimonial is great to use for your marketing. I know that a lot of clinicians and educators don't necessarily get trained in marketing, but being able to market what we do is super important, especially if you are a therapist who is running a business and you're selling your services, or even if you're in a healthcare or a school setting, we do have to sell our services, even if we're not literally selling our services. We've got to be able to back up what we do. So having someone say nice things about you is always really helpful. And so that's why using something like a testimonial from somebody else saying something, how wonderful it was to work with you, is great. So that's definitely something valuable that we should use. But where it differentiates from evidence-based practice is first, again, it's not the same thing as a clinical case study because it's just, again, something nice that someone said about you. As opposed to being something where you were rigorously taking data for, a before and after and reporting on the case and descriptively talking about what's going on. So it's different in that respect. But when it comes to comparing this to the client perspectives piece of the evidence-based practice triangle, how I interpret the client perspectives is a couple different ways. So first, I see the client perspectives piece in evidence-based practice being about feasibility. So for example, that when you see a client and they come to you, you have a set of processes that you use that you've developed based on your clinical expertise working with people. So there's the clinical expertise piece. And then you also are aware of what's going on in the research, and you're aware of the literature in the peer-reviewed journals and things like that. And so you have a toolbox of evidence-based strategies to pull from. And then you get a client that walks into your office, and you need to take that clinical experience and what you know from peer-reviewed studies and find a plan that fits for your patient, and actually take the information from your experience in the peer-reviewed articles and figure out which ones are appropriate for your patient. So that's one way that you can apply the client perspective, because a lot of times you might need to customize it in some way based on their culture, based on, the support they have in their home setting. So there's all kinds of things that would impact the way that you actually implement the information from your past experience and the research out there. And then somebody else brought the important point that don't we start with the client perspective? And I think that this is another way of looking at it that is also very useful, because when it comes to the triangle, I think that there are certain models that will say, we need to start with one before the other, but I see it kind of a cyclical thing where it's really hard to say where our entry point is, because we're really always integrating all of them at once. But one way to look at that is, let's say that you have a client that comes into you. Well, in a way, you are kind of starting with the client perspectives, because they're telling you, this is what I want to work on. And also they're telling you things like, these are my goals. And so obviously you want to think about their goals before you're even designing the treatment plan. And so you're obviously starting with the client perspectives, and then you're pulling from the evidence and pulling from your own experience to help them meet those goals. And then you're cycling back around, because as you use the evidence and your experience, you're also taking that to figure out what fits for your patient. So you kind of have come full circle, starting with the client perspectives, thinking about the research and your experience, and then thinking about, how will that fit for them? So that's how I see client perspectives. As you can see, it's very different than just, a testimonial, someone saying something nice for you. Obviously, within the context of client perspectives, hopefully they say something nice about working with you. But you can see it's very different. It's very context dependent. And it is kind of a process where we're integrating all of those things. So as I've said before, when I said client testimonials are not part of evidence-based practice, at least the way a lot of people use them, I'm certainly not suggesting that they're not valuable. They're absolutely valuable. We just have to understand how to use them and where it's appropriate to use them and how they fit into the picture. So I hope this was helpful. Definitely follow my page or share this video if you found it useful.